Alberta just offered its teachers a double-digit pay raise that would make them the highest paid in Western Canada, more even than in the costly city of Vancouver. That is quite something. It's weird to me that teachers are unionized as if it's some factory jobs, dangerous work or something like a coal miner. In Canada, the bulk of unions are in fact in the public sector, not blue-collar workers, not even white-collar workers, pink-collar work as they call it, including nurses and teachers, not just civil servants. The problem with government unions, though, is that they typically have a monopoly in their workforce, as in you have to be either a member of the union or even pay union dues if you're not a member of the union in order to even work. And the government has a monopoly in its own way, too. So neither side is really using its own money in these negotiations. The taxpayers' interests are usually subverted. Even conservative governments are tempted just to throw money at a government union just to avert a strike. Now, Donald Trump is different. In some ways, I think he's enjoying the current government shutdown in the United States. I think he means to use it to make some deep, permanent spending cuts to sort of trap the Democrats in their shutdown. Here's his director of management and budget proposing to permanently let go around 10,000 staff. Now, that's a drop in the bucket in the size of the U.S. workforce, but still, they're talking about shutting down the bulk of the health department and the education department and using the shutdown as the opportunity to do so. But in Canada, I think most conservatives are far more timid. Anyways, Alberta has made this super generous offer to government teachers, which in its own way is outrageous. Why should government workers with pretty much guaranteed job security get a double-digit pay raise at the expense of the rest of the workers in the province? But the teachers' union, which really has become an extension of the NDP opposition, has radicalized the teachers over the extremist issue of transgender policy in the schools. What I mean by that is the provincial government wants age-appropriate books in young classes, not extreme sex content. And there's been a lot of books just crazy. I'd even call them pornographic for really young kids. So the government wants to stop that. They also want to end the secrecy of many of these transgender sex student clubs, where kids were encouraged to change their names from a boy to a girl and to identify as the other sex. And teachers promised to keep all that a secret from their parents. So these were secret clubs where kids would transition and the school would promise to keep the parents out of it. Just crazy, crazy stuff. Smith has taken steps to ensure that parents are kept informed of these things. And she's also taken steps to ban men and boys from competing in women's and girls' sports and going into their changing rooms. By the way, these are enormously popular positions, far broader than just the Conservative Party base. I haven't seen a poll in recent months, but I'd hazard a guess that 80% of Albertans support these common sense moves on transgenderism, but not the union, or at least the union leadership. So anyways, the teachers were threatening a strike. Smith ordered them back to work, and Smith preemptively used the notwithstanding clause to preempt leftist judge shopping, where the unions would find some NDP judge who would agree to throw everything that the government did out. That's basically the problem that Donald Trump has, doesn't he? So the unions are big mad, and they're talking about a general strike now. A general strike, you know what that is? Where everybody just goes on strike across the economy. That has not happened in Canada, according to my research, since 1976. Actually, a protest against Pierre Trudeau, if you can believe it. That was a one-day general strike. Actually included some private sector unions, too. Now, of course, most government sector unions would probably be radicalized enough to join a general strike, though I think they would be punished by the courts if they did so in violation of their contracts. That's the thing about contracts. You have to abide them. But I think it's unbelievable or unlikely or even unthinkable that hardworking private sector union members would strike out of sympathy for government teachers, not over any money issue, but, typically teachers work 8 months a year and are the highest paid in Western Canada now. And I just don't see it that some hardworking oil and gas union member is going to go on strike to support government workers. I just don't see it, especially if the real issue is political ideology, especially on transgender issues. So I think the unions will blink here, but they're obviously seething. And the problem for Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and her United Conservative Party is that they may win They may have won the election last time, and they may represent the bulk of the province, which I believe they do, especially on things like transgenderism. But they are sitting atop a mountain of civil servants, many of whom are neutral, but many of whom are radicalized and will do anything to undermine the government despite its democratic mandate. I think a lot of civil servants consider themselves the permanent government, the keepers of the province, the deep state, if you will. And they're sort of resenting the fact that a conservative is in power. And so I've been thinking, what can Premier Smith do to rein in the rogue deep state? How can she take power away from extremists who haven't won elections but are burrowing into the government and thwarting her plans? Now, I used to think the best politician in North America at doing this sort of thing was Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. When he won his election in Florida, it was just by a few thousand votes. Oh my God, it was so close. But now it's not even close. Florida is so firmly in the Republican camp, and it's largely due to the fact that DeSantis has used every lever, pushed every button, used every power, every tool, every staffing appointment he can to purge the permanent ruling class from the state and replace them with his own men and women. In short, he governs like a Democrat in that he wasn't meek. But wow, has Donald Trump ever eclipsed that? Starting from his very first day in office, actually starting before he was inaugurated with pronouncements, but literally on day one of him being officially the president, he started issuing executive orders. I think he must have issued 20 on the first day. And he has also sacked entire boards and commissions, firing people who aren't on board with his mission. Like I say, acting like a Democrat, but in pursuit of his own Republican agenda. Now, that's how Canadian Liberals and NDPers act in power. They spend everything, tax everything, they appoint every one of their friends, politicize everything. I gave the example of the Debates Commission the other day, where Trudeau just put his personal friends. But that's the least of it. I mean, one of my main criticisms of Stephen Harper's term is that he didn't make any permanent changes. The CBC being an example, the unfilled Senate seats being another example. You could add to that the Human Rights Commission. Why didn't he shut that down, or at least stack it? So many government NGOs, entire bureaucracies. So back to Alberta. Premier Danielle Smith surely knows that the government bureaucracy she runs would fire her in a second if they could find a way, and they'll leak against her, and they'll slow walk her policies that they hate, and they'll push back, and they'll basically work to rule, as any union would do in resistance. Basically, Trump's first term, before he realized that personal loyalty wasn't about vanity, it was about stopping unelected bureaucrats from thwarting the democratic will of the people as expressed in their vote for the elected government. So what might Danielle Smith do, not only to survive this latest eruption by the NDP, but also future attempts to undermine her?